Before reciting Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Narayan, to Narayana Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Śrīla Prabhupada, the author. Natabara Gaurāṅga Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nayati. By regular attendance in classes of the Bhagavatam, the rendering service to the pure devotee, all his troubles of the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service to the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Today we are reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6. The Purusha Shukla confirmed text 32, which was yesterday's class, but Prabhupada gave class. There was no class for that. And 33. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Text 32. I'm going to just read the Sanskrit in translation and purport, and then we'll do the repetition when we get to the next verse. You can go on with me, I guess. Shrijamitan niyuktoham haro haratitan visha vishvam purusha rupena paripati shakti drik. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Śrīla Prabhupada, Prabhupada Ki Jai. By His will, I create, Lord Shiva destroys, and He Himself, in His eternal form, as the personality of Godhead, maintains everything. He is the powerful controller of these three energies. Purport. The conception of one without a second is clearly confirmed here. The one is Lord Vasudeva, and only by His different energies and expansions are different manifestations, both in the material and in the spiritual world, maintained. In the material world also, Lord Vasudeva is everything, is stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 19. Vasudeva sarvam iti. Everything is Vasudeva only. In the Vedic hymns also, the same Vasudeva is held to be supreme. It is said in the Vedas, Vasudeva paro brahman na chanyo ritosti tatvata. In fact, there is no greater truth than Vasudeva. And Lord Krishna affirms the same truths in Bhagavad Gita 7.7. Mata parataram nanya. There is nothing above me, Lord Krishna. So the conception of oneness, as overly stressed by the impersonalist, is also accepted by the personalist devotee of the Lord. The difference is that the impersonalist denies personality in the ultimate issue, whereas the devotee gives more importance to the personality of Godhead. Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam explains this truth in the verse under discussion. Lord Vasudeva is one without a second, because he is all-powerful, he can expand himself as well as display his omnipotencies. The Lord is described here as omnipotent by his three energies, Tri Shakti Trig. So, primarily his three energies are internal, marginal, and external. The external energy is also displayed in the three modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Similarly, the internal potency is also displayed in three spiritual modes, Samvit, Santini, and Hladini. The marginal potency of the living entities is also spiritual. But the living entities are never equal to the Lord. The Lord is Nirasta Samya Atishaya. In other words, no one is greater than or equal to the Supreme Lord. So the living entities, including even such great personalities as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, are all subordinate to the Lord. In the material world, also in his eternal form of Vishnu, he maintains and controls all the affairs of the demigods, including Brahma and Shiva. Text 33. Iti te bihitam tata.
Iti te bihitam tata.
Etedam anuprichyasi.
Etedam anuprichyasi.
Nanyat bhagavata kinchit.
Nanyat bhagavata kinchit.
Bhavyam sarasad atmakam.
Bhavyam sarasad atmakam.
Okay, please chant.
Iti te bihitam tata.
Iti te bihitam tata.
Etedam anuprichyasi.
Etedam anuprichyasi.
Nanyat bhagavata kinchit.
Nanyat bhagavata kinchit.
Bhavyam sarasad atmakam.
Bhavyam sarasad atmakam. Synonyms. Iti, thus. Te, unto you. Abhitam, abhihitam. Explain. Tata, my dear son. Yatha, as. Idam, all these. Anuprichyasi, as you have inquired. Na, never. Anyat, ever anything else. Bhagavata, beyond the personality of Godhead. Kinchit, nothing. Bhavyam, to be thought ever. Sat, cause. Asat, effect. Atmakam, in the matter of. Translation in purport. My dear son, whatever you inquire from me, I thus explain unto you, and you must know for certain that whatever there is, either as cause or as effect, both in the material and spiritual worlds, is dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The complete cosmic situation, both in the material and the spiritual manifestations of the energies of the Lord, is working and moving first as the cause and then as the effect. But the original cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Effects of the original cause can become the causes of other effects, and thus everything, either permanent or temporary, is working as cause and effect. Because the Lord is the primeval cause of all persons and all energies, he is called the cause of all causes, as confirmed in the Brahmasamhita affirms, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Ananya Nirgovindaha Sarvakarna Karanam. And Bhagavad Gita is stated, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mata Sarvam Vardhite Iti Matva Bhajanti Mam Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. So, the original primeval cause is Vigraha, the personal, and the impersonal spiritual effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, is also an effect of the Supreme Brahman, Brahmadohi Pratishtaham, Lord Krishna. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gnyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobisham Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Scha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurāṅgi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Dhruvyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam bhangam gayate girim yadkritam vande Shri Guru Dinatarikam. Reading 2 verses. By his will, I create. Lord Shiva destroys, and he himself in his eternal form as the personality of Godhead maintains everything. He is the powerful controller of these 3 energies. My dear son, whatever you require from me, I thus explained unto you, and you must know for certain that whatever there is, either as cause or as effect, both in the material and spiritual worlds, is dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this chapter 6, Purusha Sutta, confirmed is a continuation of chapter 5, the cause of all causes. And right now we have, in the flow of the Bhagavatam, is Narada Muni asking Lord Brahma about different things, noticing that Lord Brahma didn't seem to be the topmost living entity, and so he's trying to get to the bottom of that. And at the start of chapter 5, he asks 6 questions in verse 1 and 2. And to try to get the answer of that, to figure out who is actually supreme, which is one of the main points. Who is the actual shelter of everything? That's like the main point of the Bhagavatam, to show that Krishna is actually the shelter of everything. And so this question kind of has Lord Brahma's feel in so many variegated ways. And so the 6 questions were, what is like the form of this world? What is its shelter? How is it created? How is it maintained? Who's controlling it? And what is it made of? And in short, Lord Brahma, and this what we've been reading basically the whole chapter 5 and up to now in chapter 6, we're almost the way through chapter 6. He's been describing the answer to these 6 questions. But in summary, everything's Krishna. And that's what this last verse is. Verse 33 is Lord Brahma, he's just telling you. So everything you ask,
I'm combined with the living entities and the living entities like material nature, what they've been covered over with. So that's like, Bhumirapo nolo vayu kamano budare vacha ahankar ityame bina prakritir ashtada. So there's 8 material elements, 5 are gross, 3 are subtle. And so all the stuff, the matter in the material world is made of the 5 gross material elements. And then there's the subtle material elements, which is more or less the material nature of the living entity. We have our false egos and our minds and our intelligences, which we try to, the mind is accepting or rejecting based off what it thinks its identity is. And that false ego is just there. It's trying to keep the identity as I am an enjoyer, I am the controller, anything but I am the servant of Krishna. I'm the servant of anything. Usually the false ego keeps us from that, and that's the most subtle element. Then the intelligence is like the machine, the computer that tries to satisfy all the different demands of the mind. So the mind says, if I'm the controller, then that means I should control something. So then how do I control this particular thing? How do I enjoy this particular situation? And so the intelligence supplies that, and the mind accepts and rejects based on what it gets from the senses. That was good, I want more of that. That was bad, I want to avoid that. And then in the next verse, Krishna says, Aparayamiti stwanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat. That above these 8 material things, which are the material energy, prakriti, then there's the living entity. And at the end of chapter 3, Krishna explains how the living entity, the soul, the jiva, is actually higher than all of these. And then also in this verse, this is also my prakritim. In this prakritim, his marginal energy is param, is stronger than the external energy. But it's not more than Krishna, even though they're both spiritual, as we heard in the purport of 32. They're not both spiritual. So, in summary, the form of the world is just these things all combining together, and this is answered in chapter 5. Then, what is the shelter or the background of all this? And Lord Brahma answers that it's simply Krishna. And in the background of all that is the demigods, which are just serving the Lord as parts of his body. And then there's different kinds of sacrifices that are offered to the demigods. So all of that is the background of what's happening with the jivas. Like, we may be doing something, but as we try to smell something, there's a demigod behind that, and behind that is the Supreme Lord. And so then that goes into what we've been hearing, we've heard this, how is it created? We've heard this whole, I'm sure Chandrasekhar Maharaj has explained a few times in the last few weeks, how the Mahatattva is agitated, and then there's the different modes, and they create the different elements, and so on and so forth, down into the actual creation. And with each element that's created, there's also the ability for the jiva to experience that element, as well as the demigod behind that element that's like bridging that gap. Because actually we may think that we're even controllers of our body, but we're not even controllers of our body. It's actually multifarious demigods which are making the body do everything and helping us have our experience. And behind that, it's the Lord's will that they're functioning, and it's his potency that's allowing everything to function. Then another question that Narada asked of the 6th question is, how is it maintained? So in short, it's maintained by Krishna. Ete chamsa kala pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyalokam Lokam Mrijanti Yuge Yuge. That there's different people that are trying to upset the demigods, which is upsetting the subtle order and the subtle background of the whole material world, and Krishna corrects those, and then in the chapter 4, the very famous verse, Paritranaya Sarunam. Yeah, and what does it mean? I forgot.
And to reestablish the principles of religion.
Oh yeah, okay, thank you for reminding me. And yeah, that's Krishna is maintaining everyone in the spiritual and material worlds. In the material world, he maintains them by taking different avatars to keep the actual purpose of the world flowing and to keep the everyone maintained. All the animals from a microscopic amoeba in the ocean to gigantic whale or an elephant are being maintained by the Lord, and it's due to the proper workings of nature, the Lord's perfect creation of nature and the demigods, and so he's making sure that nothing ever gets disturbed. He's the one actually doing that via so many different indirect and sometimes direct ways, and then he sustains his devotees through engaging in different nectarian pastimes with them, and so they both, the Lord and his devotees, experience rasa, and by that experience their existence is maintained. And actually in this verse, Paritranaya Sadhunam, it's explained that Krishna himself, when he came, took an avatar, that he didn't have to come, there was many demons, and Mother Earth came to Lord Brahma and asked for some help, and so there's so many demons overburdening the world, so much military strength, but he didn't actually need to come to do that. It could have been achieved by so many of his associates or his plenary portions, and actually, according to the acharyas, whenever Krishna did, even when he was in Vrindavan, when he was killing a demon or anywhere else, it was an amsa of Krishna that would come and kill that demon, but it wasn't Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam Krishna, because Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam Krishna, he only ever engages in loving relationship with his devotees, and that's the main meaning of Paritranaya Sadhunam. And the real dharma, dharma samstapa narpayat, samstapa means to create. So he maintained and upheld dharma, but the real dharma is actually, bhakti, or, loving devotion to himself. And so by exhibiting his pastimes in Vrindavan, that was the real dharma that he upheld. Otherwise, there's different yuga avatars, and they do some sort of yuga dharma, but most of the time it's not directly related to serving Krishna in Vrindavan in the most pure, loving reciprocation. Then we get to the question, who is controlling it? And that was answered in the first verse that we read today, text 32. And Brahma saying, well, essentially me, Shiva, and Krishna, or Vishnu, they maintain everything, but by Krishna's will. He's actually the controller of the energies of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Even though Brahma is the avatar of the mode of passion, and Shiva is the avatar of the mode of ignorance, Krishna's, by his will, they do his service, do service for him. And then the last question was, what is it made of? And that was described in more or less all of this chapter 6 leading up to this last summary verse. And it reminded me of a Bhagavad Gita verse that kind of summarizes all of those. Brahmarpanam, Brahma Havir, Brahmagno, Brahma Hutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, Brahma Karmas Samadhina. So what is it made of? Well, it's all spiritual, ultimately meant for the Lord's pleasure. That's what everything's made of. It's made of Krishna and sacrifice to Krishna. That's the essence of the whole creation. The purpose of the material creation is to correct the soul's desire to try to enjoy without Krishna, to get them to want to enjoy with Krishna, or even more perfectly stated, to get them so that they only desire Krishna's enjoyment. And so all of the from the agitation of the Mahatattva to the winding up back into Narayan, each creation of the whole material universe is to enable those spirit souls to be able to ultimately surrender to Krishna and ultimately to love Krishna. And so, in summary, everything's dependent on the Supreme Lord. Brahma is saying, whatever you inquire from me, I have explained to you, and you must know for certain that whatever there is, as cause or effect, both material and spiritual, it's all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ekala Ishvara Krishna Ara Sabhabhritya Yari Yachi Nachaya Sataichi Karya Nritya. Krishna is the Ekala Ishvara. He's the only controller. He's the supreme controller. And everyone, the demigods, and even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are just dancing to his order. And like Prabhupada in that famous prayer he wrote when he was docking, coming and seeing America for the first time. I'm just a puppet in your hands, make me dance as you like. So, and this whole thing of like everything being Krishna, it reminded me of the section in chapter 9 in text 4 till 10. There's basically the Lord is describing his inconceivable relationship with the material world. Like essentially we have in Vedic knowledge we have the three categories: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So Sambandha Jnana is understanding the relationship of the material world, of the jiva, and of Krishna, or of Prakriti in Krishna and the jiva. And so there's different relations. So one of those is Krishna in the material world. So how is that related? And Krishna is saying in text 4, he's saying that I pervade the entire universe, and everything is in me, but I'm not in everything. And then he says also, everything isn't in me. Like in the next verse, he kind of contradicts himself. So it's like this really, it's an inconceivable thing. And the way to really understand that, so in text 4, he's saying, I pervade the entire universe. So what does that mean? Does anyone have any thoughts? How does Krishna pervade the entire universe? By his Shakti, but also
Through Brahman effulgence and through Paramatma.
Yeah, those are other two ways. So, and specifically the Paramatma avatar is like, because he's saying all living beings are dependent on me. When he's saying they're in me, but he's not dependent on the like. Every single atom, in between every atom, there's like the super soul is there in everyone's heart. The super soul is there, and so like that, everything is dependent on him, and he's all pervading. But he's not dependent on us being here. He's not like the demigods are. There's like a kind of codependence between the jiva and the demigods, but Krishna is not like a demigod. He's not dependent like that. But also he isn't in everything, and that's in the next verse. So the way we can understand that is that he's the source of the energy which maintains the world. Although he's not directly like doing, for example, like the planets are floating in space. So space is one of the Lord's energies, like he just said in chapter 7. But the Lord's not the same as space. The space is there by his will. And in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining, like, some people think of God as like Atlas carrying the globe, and like God has to like, the whole material universe and everything, I gotta just do it, like, and he's like struggling to hold it up, but that's the God is actually, he's Satya Sankalpa. Whatever he wants, that's just reality. Like reality could be defined as whatever Krishna desires. And so he's not struggling. And so the whole world, although Krishna doesn't have to personally do anything, it's all being maintained by his will. So that's how he's simultaneously, everything's dependent on him, and he's in everything, but simultaneously he's completely independent and not in everything. And although the Lord is like fully in so many different ways in the universe, it takes one to be trained in knowledge and actually with love. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena. If you want to actually see the different, inconceivable qualities of the Lord and perceive his presence, you need to have your eyes smeared with love. And luckily, even if we don't have that, Krishna gave the Bhagavad Gita, and specifically chapter 7 and chapter 10 both have very long sections where Krishna is explaining how we can perceive him. Rasoham apsu konteya, that's one Prabhupada gives a lot. If you just taste things, the taste of water. And water is the element where in Vedic chemistry, it's not like modern day chemistry where they have the periodic table of the elements, and the way you understand that is by how many protons and neurons and electrons are there, and therefore you can classify some substance. But actually, if you would make the periodic table and you just look at that, it's all earth element, because it's or more or less like that, because the earth element is all the other qualities of the elements, and then it's like the full manifestation of it. Whereas in Vedic, the understanding of the different tanmatras and substances, you have an element like water, and that's an unknown thing that we can't really like perceive. But when our senses, which are also not us, come in contact to that, then what we experience is taste. So it's like these two things, our senses are different from us, and then there's this element that's out there called water. And when the sense comes in contact with the water, then there's an experience, and that experience is taste. So that taste is coming from Krishna. He's providing the element of the water, he's providing the demigod that can help you give the experience and help your senses contact it, and he's providing a material body which has the senses, and he's empowering you to have that experience. So all that together it's ultimately Krishna, and it's consisting of Krishna as well. And Prabhupada said that, if you're just drinking a glass of water, you can remember this and become Krishna conscious like that. If a drunk is a wino and he's just drinking a bunch of wine, but if he can remember that I'm having this experience because of God, then it can help him become Krishna conscious. Ultimately, if he wants to get initiated, he has to stop drinking, but it's a start. And so in this way, there's so many ways that Krishna reminds us about him, because he's everywhere, but the problem is that we don't see him everywhere, we're not conscious of that. And so if we ever want a kickstart in that, we can read chapter 7 or chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita, and that way can kind of kickstart our consciousness to be able to try to see Krishna everywhere. And like Prabhupada said in the purport, he quoted Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So Krishna is the Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of everything. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Ham Sarvasya Prabhavo, everything comes from him. So including, Kali Yuga, including the coronavirus, including Mayavad philosophy. Like I was saying, the whole material world is created just for the living entities to enjoy. So, and its function is to get them to stop enjoying. So one thing that has to happen is the cycle of the yugas, because some living entities are more pious and some are less pious. So if a less pious person, they're not even eligible to really be born with a bunch of pious people in a pious place where a lot of pious things are happening. So there needs to be a degradation of piety. So one way that Krishna accomplishes that is that he asks Lord Shiva to come in the form, and this is in the Padma Purana, to come in the form of Shankaracharya, so that then when Shiva, Prabhupada says that Shankaracharya has carried the cheating propensity to the extreme to mislead those averse to Krishna. So he uses so many different faulty logics and things to make people think that the ultimate point of the Shastra, which is actually to love Krishna, ends up becoming this very convoluted, try to just forget everything. And what that does, how that functions, is that very few people actually really try for that, and they end up just giving up and going full on into sense gratification. Because what's explained by the methods and the goal explained by Shankaracharya is not something that people are looking for. And people are ultimately the soul is looking for rasa, or looking for taste. It's looking for a good experience. It's looking for pleasure. Anandu maya bhyasat. That's the purpose of everything. So if you, as with the Mayavad philosophy, it turns you away from that. It says that no, actually, ultimately everything is just, well, not nothing, but everything is just Brahman. It's just Brahman having, which is formless, qualityless, and there's no taste. There's nothing. And it's just a perverted form of Buddhism, which is also, instead of saying everything is just one or everything is Brahman, Buddhism say everything is zero. There's nothing. And Bhaktivikas Maharaj was in one of the Buddhist countries, and he was talking. He saw they were like, there was some place. He saw this person buying some pork. He's asking why are you buying pork? Don't you know? Because in Buddhism they understand karma as well. Don't you understand if you're eating this, then that you're going to have to suffer. You're going to become a pig. Why are you even trying to eat this? And then they said, oh, it's ananda. I like it. It gives me ananda to eat it. And then he said, well, you're getting the ananda now, but you're going to suffer later. Don't you know that? He said, yeah. And when I'm a pig, I'll also have ananda. And so like this, because the philosophy is such a cheating philosophy, and it's doesn't have anything to actually attract the soul, then ultimately they're just going to be put into material sense gratification, because they don't have any idea of the spiritual world. And so they're not going to have there's nothing to really keep them from doing that. And so even though they understand the philosophy and maybe they even believe in it, even if they have full faith in it, it's just not worth it. It's not worth their time. They don't care. They'll be a pig, and pigs actually also have their own enjoyment. It's very degraded. It's like if you don't know that there's actual sweet rice without sand, and all you had is sweet rice with dirt mixed into it, then you're just going to keep eating the sweet rice with dirt. And the Mayavadis say just stop eating, but you're hungry and you want to eat, so you're going to go for the sweet rice with dirt. But the Vaishnavas say no, you have to start taking the dirt out of your sweet rice, and eventually you'll get pure sweet rice, and that's the thing that you should be trying to do. So they say we should purify our consciousness, purify our life, and then try to actually serve Krishna and love Krishna, and that's the Ananda, is serving Krishna. He's the center for that, and when we realize that, then we can actually realize full happiness. So there's a few things I wanted to maybe talk about Mayavad philosophy, but it's 8:45 now, so maybe we'll turn it over to everyone else and make a comment and a question, and we can progress to the conclusion.
I had a comment. You were saying that you're explaining how, well, the ego, the false ego, makes us identify with basically anything other than a servant of Krishna, any false designations. And then you're saying how, and then through the senses, you come in contact with sense objects, and then your intelligence perceives enjoyment, and then it creates kind of like a snowball effect. So your mind's saying yes to those things that bring enjoyment and no to those things that don't bring enjoyment. But then also there's the three modes of material nature that are involved with that, because some people find some things enjoying, and those same things other people don't find enjoyment in those things. Just like, whatever, different music, different foods.
I have a good example in this regard that just reminded me. Like there's in a Buddhist country or somewhere, it was like an Asian, Buddhist country. They have this thing where basically it's like they let a dead animal rot for like a long time in like these different spices, and it makes this like really disgusting like sauce that they put on everything, and like they think it's really good. But then those same people, when the devotees were like in their apartment next to them frying things in ghee, they thought the smell was reprehensible of the fresh ghee frying and everything.
Well, that kind of brings up the point I was going to make.
Wake up, Braj.
It's crazy, so many distractions. People that don't understand the philosophy, just like materialists, their whole concept of life is that you're supposed to enjoy your senses, you're supposed to enjoy this world. So when they see the devotees, dressed in Vaishnava clothing, shaved head, chanting Hare Krishna, they're trying, it's very hard, difficult for them to understand that how are these people enjoying life, because their whole conception is just enjoying their senses. So it's like, they look at us like we're crazy, because to them it's like, if I was in that position, I would not be feeling like a controller and an enjoyer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so weird that they would do something like that. So that's just kind of something I thought about. And then, for some reason, I forgot what you said, but then a thought came to my head that even when like an advanced and senior Vaishnava leaves this world, everybody's like sad and they write so many things on the internet, and it's good to grieve when a Vaishnava leaves because we're going to miss their association. But in another sense, it's glorious because we know, okay, maybe that person went back to Godhead, but even if he didn't go back to Godhead, he's given a new body to continue his service. If he leaves his body, that means Krishna, for some reason, is thinking, well, he needs to leave for one reason or another, but one reason could be like, okay, he had a lot of health problems, or he was really old, or whatever, so I'm going to give him a new body so he can engage in service even better. So it's actually a joyful situation. Even Krishna says that to Arjuna, when Arjuna's lamenting about, well, I have to kill all the Kauravas, and Bhishma Dev's there. But then in the purport it says actually Arjuna should be rejoicing because they're going to get new bodies and they're going to be youthful again and have full energy.
Yeah, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Bhishma and Duryodhan Bhishma and Dronacharya were getting older and older, and so either they were going to get heavenly bodies and enjoying the heavenly planets, or they were going to go back to Godhead in spiritual bodies. There's no limitation for that. And I remember Ram Roy saying many times that when Ayendra Prabhu would be doing kirtan for devotees who were leaving their body, at the point when they were leaving their body, like devotees would become morose, then Ayendra would become more ecstatic. Like, what are you talking about? This is ecstatic. He went back to Godhead. Like, and he died in Vrindavan during the kirtan and during this and that. Like, aren't you excited and happy for him? And like, it's so great. Well, that's the understanding we should cultivate, and maybe by the increase of our shraddha and the increase of our practice, we'll actually get more experience of that.
I was just thinking, because we have the understanding, which we accept that, like, for
mean, to get to that, I don't know if I would just straight up tell someone that, because there's for things that people can't perceive, there's ways that they have to get that knowledge. For things you can perceive directly, it's very simple to tell someone. But for things that you can't perceive, like you can tell them like cow dung is antiseptic. So they can directly perceive that if they just inquire a little bit and try to, use their prataksha, use their Hanuman and stuff a little bit. But for something like that, it's so difficult and subtle to actually perceive that really the best way to like get it is to first have them have faith in Shastra. And so they have to understand how does Praman Tattva work. And until you understand how Praman Tattva works, then it's not something that like people won't understand that. But in a simple way, it's like everything is being controlled. I mean, how, like the instant you want to do something, it happens. So, even though, people like can map out the complete brain, they think they understand every single neuron, they have no idea how the brain actually works or how consciousness works. When you have a desire, why does your desire like cause you to do something? And I think at one point they had this very far out test where they were testing someone's brain. They had like some probes in there, and then they would say like, okay, like desire to do something, and then like stop yourself from like desire to stop doing that. And they would like be able to detect those things, but I wish Krishna Kripa Prabhu was present, because he knows about this scientific test and he can explain it a little better. But eventually they came to realize that like some of the things, like you couldn't actually perceive the desire to stop doing something. But you could, if someone wanted to do something like they say like, okay, you like have the brain probe, lift your finger, but like right before you lift your finger, decide not to do it. And like they would be able to detect like a little like pulse of the brain to like lift his finger, but he would decide not to do it, and then he wouldn't lift his finger. But they wouldn't be able to find where is that actual brain wave of not doing that. So anyways, if ultimately people have to be humble and submissive and say, how does this work? I don't know, and I have imperfect senses and imperfect authorities that I try to get my knowledge from. So they have to find a perfect authority beyond imperfect senses, and then when they hear that, they can actually hear the right information, and then when they have actually follow out the conclusion of that information and build their faith up more, they can get experience of that. I mean, ultimately, you can like, what's his name, in Gopa Kumar, you can go and you can meet Indra, you can meet all these demigods and see exactly what they're doing. You can meet Chandragupta, how he's aware of all the sinful reactions of every living being, and when they come up to Yamaraj, he's just like a computer just telling them this and that and this and that, he did this and that, my lord, what should we do with them? And that's ultimately, then you can show them. But if you're not extremely potent, you can't just show people that. We haven't experienced, I'm speaking for myself, I don't know what people's experiences, but I doubt many people have experienced directly, conversing with the demigods and things like that. Although if you were Narada Muni and you came and you were preaching to that guy, Narada Muni could convince him pretty strongly. Like he just shows a video of the guy's like future life, like look at where you're going. And the guy gets really scared, and so he decides to not do it.
I thought of like a really simple way to explain it to a layman. Like, well, you want to do so many things in just everyday, mundane life. Like, you want to flush the toilet. Okay, well, the government is permitting the water to be hooked up to your building so that you can do that. So you need to get permission from the government. And also, you want to take the subway. So there's so many people behind that subway that are making it work and committing that you can do it. So similarly, on a grander scale, there's so
that can actually be like almost like a disservice. There's a saying that the expert preacher uses the least amount of words, and they
Most
also
impact.
have the maximum effect. And I've had actually experience of this. Like one time, there were 4 of us at a book table at a university, and some guy comes up, a student, and he points at the Bhagavad Gita. He's like, "Hey, I've read part of that. Some people say it's like sexist. Is that true?" And then,
Oh my God, you poor guy.
and then Parameshwar gives him like a whole spiel about, he's about female and male, and he goes on for like so many minutes. And then Bhakta Kyle butts in, and he explains his thing. And then like Rishi Kumar gives another purport, and then I'm about to give him my purport, and the guy's like, "I was just looking for a yes or no answer. Is it sexist or not?" And then I was like, "No, it's not." He's like, "All right, I'll read it then."
Yeah, that's a good point. You let them actually ask you a question. If they ask an open-ended question like that, you just give the simple answer, and then if they want to discuss, people can discuss. I mean, we should be also ready to discuss, but that's definitely true. Prabhupada is super expert at doing that.
I've just been watching some of Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam's videos, and he's so expert exactly at doing that thing. In like 2 minutes, he presents such a convincing series of points about an issue, whatever it is, something pretty much an issue. And just like one after the other, super simple language, simple format, and it just makes like really logical sense. And then I've seen other lectures for like an hour and a half on the same thing, which I just don't know what about.
Like instead of trying to convince them, because you were saying
Or like Vishnu John's
so
preaching
you're
also.
saying that lift this beer at so many demigods, but like instead of telling the guy all about demigods, the simple thing is, yeah, God's in control of everything we do.
Yeah.
And you just like encapsulated the whole philosophy right there.
And later, when you go into the second canto of the Bhagavatam, they can start to understand how the Mahatattva gets agitated, and there's the demigods and the sense objects and the senses and all that. But if they're not sitting here in the Bhagavatam class, then there's no point to give them a Bhagavatam class. I mean, they should come and sit and agree to sit, and have prasadam with us, and ideally start chanting Hare Krishna, and then they can understand the details. But they can understand that principle very easily. Like I was saying at the beginning of the class, Brahma's explaining over 2 chapters of the Bhagavatam these 6 questions, like in a minute amount of detail, a lot of detail. And ultimately he's like, yeah, it's all Krishna. So you just start with that, and if someone wants to go more in depth, then like, okay, well, I don't have time to talk to you about that now. When you come for the Bhagavatam class, and then that way, yeah. Śrīmad, yes. If it's sexist, if the Bhagavad Gita is sexist. No, that's what he said. That's all he said. No, it's not.
And then what did he say?
He said, okay, great. I'll read it.
He said, no, it's not equal.
No, it's not sexist.
I know, but he said.
That's it. That's all he said.
That's all.
Yeah. And then the guy agreed to buy it. He wanted to read it. The guy said, okay, great. I'll read it.
If you want to read.
Yeah. Okay. Grantaraj, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.